right. Morning. Morning, everybody. I am ready to rock and roll. Whoa, the busy past couple of days it's been. Teaching kids filmmaking is an exhausting task, especially when you got like 15 of them and they all want to do their own thing. So summer is off to a rambunctious start, and so it's nice to have these calming mornings where I get a chance to talk to the world and hopefully have some adult conversations instead of dealing with kids. But today, I really wanted to get at a subject that it's touched on. It's something that's constantly updating, and it's something that people continue to have questions about, and that's cameras, and specifically cameras as it relates to how to live stream with them. What I see on the forums like Facebook and Discord and whatnot is there's just some overall confusion as to what is the best camera to go with. Now, in my training series that I have on my website, it's over at basecamp.pro. I actually spend a long time talking about using your iPhone with a product called Camo Studio that enables you to get some really nice camera effects using your iPhone. And I think that in a pinch, that is the best way to go, personally. After that, there's a few other steps, but generally speaking, I try to encourage people to go with cameras that are going to make them look their best rather than what is the cheapest. And to be honest with you, when I was first getting streaming, this was one of those things that always it was like sticker shock for me. You know, you're spending all this money trying to get everything up and running, and then you go look at cameras and you're just like, whoa, what? Because you hear people talk. I have this Sony camera, I have this Canon, and you're talking high hundreds to sometimes mid-range thousands, and if you didn't budget for that, it's a bit of sticker shock. And so I try, in this little snippet that I do today, I'm gonna try and explain why you would go with one of those cameras over another. I will say this from out of the gate. I'm not a big fan of web cameras, and those are specifically cameras designed to either replace the camera that's built into your computer, or a camera that is something you just add to your computer. And I have my reasons for this, but they're often small. They're often they're decent enough quality. Don't get me wrong. As a matter of fact, this camera that's going outside right now, that is my camera that I use for. I use a little web camera for that, and I can pull up the software and pan, tilt, zoom. It's a link camera, and obviously I need to clear my window because I've got some some smudges on there, or I don't know if that might be on the lens. But my point is that that's great for that application, but it doesn't introduce a lot of the high quality features that I'm looking for. The Insta360 Link is a fine camera. But if I have my choice, when those cameras first came out, they were close to $500. And you look at some of the products from Elgato, like the Facecam, or you look at the Ozbot or Obsbot, I think that's how you say it. They're all great cameras, don't get me wrong. I just personally, I think that I would rather go with a fixed camera than something that pan, tilt, zooms, because my applications for pan, tilt, and zoom inside my studio is rather limited. I look at it more of, can I use this camera outside of the studio? Because a fixed camera that's going to sit on a stand, on a tripod, in a teleprompter, you don't need to have something that's bells and whistles. I definitely would not recommend anything less than a 4K camera, but I would say that you don't have to go, balls to the wall, as it were, with a really nice camera if it's just going to sit there, because what's the point? It's a talking head type thing, and you want to look your best, but I mean, come on, you don't need a $2,000 camera to do that, or 2,200 with the lens and everything. That adds up real quick. So, not knowing this, I ended up spending way more money than I probably needed to from the get-go. Now, the upshot is that the camera that I did end up buying, the one I'm talking to you on right now, is something that I can take with me, and I've used on multiple shoots. So like the videos that I showed in a couple of segments back, with panning and zooming and all the fun effects and everything that I did for our Rainy Cajun show, those are all done using the camera that I'm using, which is the Sony FX30. I put a link to that down at the bottom in the description. You can take a look at it. It's not a cheap camera. It's entry level without a lens. You can sometimes catch it on a good day around $1,600, but you add on a nice lens on top of that, you're talking $2,000. Like I said, I probably could have throttled back a little bit if it was just going to sit inside my teleprompter, which is what it's doing right now. But I don't think necessarily that you need to spend any time working with anything advanced if it's just going to be in your studio. So let's take a look at some other options. All right, there is one from Sony that is way less expensive, and I also put a link to it in the description. It's the Sony EV10, and the EV10, I believe, is somewhere between $600 and $800, depending upon where you're getting it from. And you also want to make sure, if you're buying a Sony, if you're buying a Nikon, if you're buying a Canon, getting it from authorized dealers. Some places on Amazon, for instance, will sell you cameras that are from unauthorized dealers, and then trying to get them back to the seller, if they're non-functional or they're not what you want, can be sometimes a bit of a headache. As a matter of fact, about this time last year, I bought the Sony, the ZV-E1, which was their latest model, and it was designed specifically for what they called vloggers, which I guess were kind of in that category. But what they didn't say is how long that the sensor would last before it overheated, which is a common occurrence in even cameras today. And it found out that running 4K 60 frames a second, which I didn't need to do in retrospect, but let's just say that's what I was doing, 4K 60 frames a second, the sensor overheated somewhere between 18 and 23 minutes. So doing even this, where it's 1 hour long, can't do it. They make fans now, third-party fan add-ons and things like that. But the nice thing about the FX30 is that it has a built-in fan. And so I keep it on pretty much all the time, and I don't know if that's a good thing or not. I know electronics in the past, when I was a younger guy, electronics did not respond well to constant heating and cooling. So it was often recommended by the manufacturers, just leave them on and they'll run at that constant temperature, because every time they cool down and then they warm back up, that would eventually make the circuit boards brittle, or make them more brittle more quickly. And so I haven't heard of that these days. I mean, that was 25, 30 years ago. I have no idea. I'm hoping that they've advanced that technology enough to where you can turn things on and off. I mean, especially a camera where it's designed to be on and off quite a bit. Morning, everybody. Thanks for everybody checking in. So that's why I selected the FX30. After I had the rough experience with the Sony EV1 or Sony ZV-E1, I am trying to get it back to the seller on Amazon, and that seller was not an authorized retailer. Amazon held my payment. They held my payment to that vendor for 8 weeks after they finally got it back. So that's what I'm saying. If you buy it from a company like B&H, and which is an authorized Sony retailer, or anywhere, where there's a local authorized retailer, if you're going to buy any of those higher end brands, make sure you're going with an authorized reseller. Yes, they cost more. Yes, but they pay for that. I mean, they pay for that authorization, and they are authorized to give you quick turnarounds on gear that may fail for reasons that are unexplainable, especially new gear. Most of them have really good return policies, or whatever you want to call it, swap outs. But Amazon, man, Amazon can really screw you if you're not careful. But yeah, it literally took 8 weeks to get my payment back from that vendor, and I couldn't rush anything along. There was nothing Amazon was even willing to do to even entertain giving me back the $2,400 it was. They were sitting on $2,400 for 8 weeks. Yeah, that was painful. Anyway, that's an aside. Buy from an authorized reseller. B&H is usually not the cheapest option, but they have everything usually, and they have a pretty good return policy. So if you're going with Sony, Nikon, Canon, those brands, a lot of the off-brand stuff you can get through Amazon, and they'll handle the returns pretty quickly. Newer, Ulanzi, those kind of camera accessory manufacturers, they tend to turn things around fairly quickly. Okay, so back to talking about camera selection. So I'm using I've got 3 vets watching right now, so I'm probably speaking a lot of things you already know, but I'm using a mirrorless lens camera. So it used to be that single lens reflex cameras, like the digital single lens reflex camera like the DSLR, or before that, the SLR, would have a mirror and all this other stuff. And now it's just a sensor aimed right at the lens. And that's what most of us are using these days. The sensors have gotten better and better and better. And, I've been in the camera business one way or another for the past 20 years. And I've seen immense strides towards taking what was high-end technology and consumerizing it, as it were, so that it could be used on less industrial applications and more on consumer applications, the FX30 being one of them. But the Sony EV10, I really like. Now, I've not personally integrated the ZV-E10 into my setup because I haven't had a need for it. I would love to have some, just some disposable money to go put one in here and have another angle like I've been doing with the DJI, the Osmo Pocket 3. Having something like that, because it would match more closely what I'm getting with the ZV or the FX30. But the ZV-E10, the reason why I like it is because it has an interchangeable lens, and as opposed to the the ZV-1 F1, where it is the lens is built into the camera, you can't change it. And the reason why I like having the interchangeable lenses is that you have different configurations. Like, for instance, right now, all of my lenses that I use on the FX30 are they're Sigma lenses. Was a trio, but now it's a quattro, I guess. It's there's a 16 millimeter, a 23 millimeter, or 30 millimeter, and then a 53 or 56 millimeter. And I'm running the 30 right now. And the 30 works pretty good for the distance. So, for instance, where my hand is right here, I'm still almost a full arm's length from the camera lens. So that gives you an idea of the distance. Sometimes people are right up on the camera, and the way my desks are situated, this was a perfect lens. So I could do this, and I didn't need optical zoom. I'm running a prime lens, which means it's a fixed focal length, but it gives me the nice blur, the bokeh, depending upon what person you're talking to, where they're from, but that kind of blurry background, that is something that goes with the depth of field that's introduced by this lens. And this is all natural. Unlike the blur effects that you see inside of Zoom calls, which are for me. I put this out there. I said, just say no to industrial, or what was it, camera effects blur or something like that. I forget the way I positioned it on Facebook or something. It drives me crazy to see somebody who is joining a professional meeting and they have that kind of blur mask around them. And then like they'll have something like this. They'll have the microphone and the microphone will be completely blurry, but they're in focus, which is not natural. And then immediately behind them is completely like almost 100% blur. None of that's reality, but some people are like, well, it's for privacy. Get a freaking green screen, all right, Neil. So it's right. So yeah. So we have some agreement on that. The fake camera blur is just, just don't do it. And that's one of the nice things about having your interchangeable lenses on your camera. You're going to get a better look almost always. With the fixed focal lengths, the camera has to be a certain distance from you to give you that effect. But you can see, like here, if I take my hand, it focuses on my hand really good. And you see how much it blurs those lights in the background now because the depth of field has changed quite a bit. But as soon as I pull away, it focuses on me. That's another key point with cameras, having good autofocus. You don't want to have to be manually adjusting focus. They call it pulling focus while you're in the middle of a live stream. So good autofocus. Sony's been known for really good autofocus. I think all the manufacturers are kind of finally falling in line when it comes to autofocus. They were all trailing way behind Sony for quite some time, but I think a lot of them have caught up at this point. But that focal component is pretty important. And the only thing with the Sonys is that you really have to block your eye in order for it to get off of focus for you. Because if your eye appears in the shot, well, let's see, how did it work? Or maybe I turned that off because I was having problems with it. But it's doing a really good job of keeping my focal length right where I want it. So that the ZVE10, I don't know what cameras you guys are all running with currently. It would be cool for you each to chime in and say your own experiences. But like I was saying at the top of the show, I really the webcams are just not for me. I don't like the fixed focal length. I don't like the small sensors. I just, their color representation, those kinds of things can be quite awful. So I would, if you have, okay, so yeah, there you go for the autofocus. So yeah, the Sony autofocus is it's great. It's great to have. So what I'm going to do now though, is I'm going to switch. So right now, again, you're looking at the Sony camera. Now, immediately off to the side of the Sony camera, I have my DJI Osmo Pocket 3. And you'll be able to see the difference. Okay, so this is the Osmo. It's not terrible, right? It actually looks pretty decent. Now, what is one of the first things you notice, though? Back here, there's no blur. Or very little blur. It's a the lens is it's a fixed aperture, meaning the opening for the light that hits the sensor is fixed. Whereas on the Sony camera, it's adjustable. This one is fixed. I had a filter on here. I lost it somewhere, but the filter added the haze around the lights and stuff like that, and the kind of the glowing effect. I don't know where it went. I took it to the airport to see my kids off for their vacation, and I never found it again. It's probably swept up somewhere by now on the airport floor. But in any case, the Osmo, this goes back to what I was saying before. This is not the best camera for your presentations if you're going for that nice blurry kind of creamy look behind you. But as far as color representation goes, go back to the FX30 here. You can see they're not. I mean, they're not identical, but they're not supposed to be. The sensor size between the two is an order of magnitude difference, right? So you're letting in far more light. You're able to pull in far more nuanced light characteristics from your image in the FX30 versus the DJI. But the DJI does, it holds its own. I mean, it's not half bad. And I can use the zoom effects. Like I can go into, like if I click this, I can use the effects inside of Ecamm and, move it around. And it works pretty well. Now I'm zoomed in here. I'm kind of zoomed in at the maximum that Ecamm does. I tried using the digital zoom that's built into the DJI. It just looks like crap. So yeah, avoid digital zoom. That's another one. Avoid digital zoom to the extent that you can. Clear image zoom on the Sony sensors is pretty dang good. As a matter of fact, that I am using clear image zoom here, and it it zoomed in like 1.4, 1.3 times, somewhere around there, and it looks fine. I don't see any kind of real pixelation at all. But if I were to zoom in this Osmo, you would see that pixelation, or at the very minimum, you would see some weird interpolation that just made it look blurry around the edges, and that's not cool. So let's see what's Lala rocking here. Face camera, okay. 5D Mark II Canon zoom lens EF20. Okay, 24 to I don't think you need 70 in a studio, but let's see. Unless you're way far from the camera. Okay, so your studio camera is the Obsbot. Okay, cool. And yeah, see, so Neil, the A7 IV that's an example of a camera that you can take with you, right? It's not something that has to sit in your studio, and you can take some amazing photography with the A7 series. And I really, and when you've got the Sony 35 f1.4, that's pretty impressive. And you've got the Sigma 16. I'm sorry, I got a camera in front of my monitor here, so I have to move to the side. Sigma 16. So this is what he's got. And let's see. Okay, yeah, and the A7 RV. Yeah, R5. Yeah, RV. RV, that would be kind of cool. Sony RV. Okay, I got you. All right, so, there again, everybody has their own requirements, right? So, for instance, I want the flexibility. So here's a perfect example. Off to the side here, you can't really see it. I don't even think I can pull it into the shot. But what I've got is a little. It looks like a boom arm that you would use on a microphone, but it's designed for cameras, and this allows me to do my camera placement wherever I want. And actually, I can, I can do this. I can see it in the shot. I just got to zoom out. There we go. You see this guy here. So I have my little. This is the Ulanzi claw that's on the top here. This is a ball mount. And then I just clip in my DJI, and that's what I was using yesterday to talk about the lighting behind me. And I can move this and position it wherever I want, and it stays put, which is really nice, right? So these guys, I mean, they're expensive, $40 for this mount, but it's so worth it. It's so worth it. I love these claws because you can see here, this is the base of the DJI. If I want to, make sure it's screwed in, but it just uses the quarter 20 mount on the bottom of the Osmo, and then I just snap it in, and it is now in place. And now I can grab the as I'm doing any kind of product shots, product photography, it's like having a third arm almost, and stabilizes my shot because you've got the gimbal on the Osmo. My whole point explaining this is that I want to have the flexibility here. So I would love to have, I think probably a ZVE 10 on here, but you really can't beat the Pocket 3 for just kind of the flexibility, and with the gimbal and everything like that, it's always going to be stable. It's always going to be oriented in the right direction. And so that's it's just an option. And these arms are, I don't know, 20 bucks from, again, this is from Newer. And I just saw that they have a 50%, up to 50%. I love how they say that. Up to 50% flash sale going on their website as of this morning. So I'm not sure how much longer that sale runs, but if you're looking to pick up some gear, they've got some good tube lights. Matter of fact, the tube light that I'm using here in this softbox, the TL60, is running at 30% off today. So I would check that Newer website, but I will say this, the Newer website, or the Newer sales channel, compared to just buying it on Amazon, usually on Amazon, you're going to get it the same price or cheaper, and it's usually going to come within a shorter time frame, and you get all the tracking that you want. I don't understand why or how Newer can get away with what they do with their e-commerce site. It's not that great. It works, don't get me wrong. I've ordered stuff from them, but it takes them up to 3 days just to process the order, which boggles my mind. I mean, it seems like you just go in, you pick it. I can't imagine they have that many orders that it takes 72 hours for them to pick your light bulb out of a box and send it on its merry way. But that's just me. I order fulfillment, once, especially when you're competing with the likes of Amazon, doesn't seem to make sense to me if you're going to take 3 days just to process the order. And then it's usually, because they're in Pennsylvania and I'm in Washington State, that's another week. So we're looking at minimum 10 business days, 8 business days, somewhere around there before I see the product. Whereas with Amazon, sometimes I can get it same day or the next day. So why would I bother? Anyway, but they do have some stuff on sale. Sometimes you can't get that on Amazon, and that this little arm is might be for sale actually. So this is, I will run this in a pinch. I will take the Osmo with me when I go on the road, and this will become my camera that I use for my Ecamm presentations. It's small, it's light, the color representation is good. It does 1080p up to 1080p 60. I just, I do not use I don't understand why Apple, which ties itself to being such a great multimedia, AV company, that they still can't put a good camera in their laptops, including this M3. It's like, oh, it's a FaceTime HD, and I don't understand it. I just don't. I mean, you think about it, all the technology they can build into a tiny little iPhone, they can't get that working on the bezel of a laptop. I just boggles my mind. But I would even be willing, I don't know about you guys, but if Apple had to put some bumps, like camera bumps, like they have on the back of the iPhone, just to get a better camera, I would be all over that. And this whole thing about saying, well, you need to use your iPhone when you're on the road as your camera, you wouldn't have to do that anymore because you'd have the same configuration. It's probably coming at some point. Some kind of AR, VR stuff. Probably will show up at some point down the road. Who knows? But I just don't know why it's taken Apple so friggin' long to get a decent camera built into their laptops that cost thousands of dollars. Yeah. Anyway, okay. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about was another tool that I use if I'm using my iPhone. I'm gonna go back to this. I'm looking in multiple directions and it's driving me nuts. Okay, so the other application that I'm talking about is a product called Camo. Camo is developed by a company named Reincubate. I believe they're based out of the no bumps. Okay, Neil has put in his vote for no bumps. Even if there were indentations in the case on the clamshell case on the inside, like right under, nothing at all. Even if they were just like machined in, I don't know. Anyway, I'm just saying, man, I would love to. They got to figure out a way to have better cameras on those laptops. They got to. I just don't. They'll get me off on a rant because I will go off on a rant. Let me, speaking of which, let me get my. Hey, Neil, this happened to you by any chance? I hand washed my mug, and this is what's happening to it. Yeah, this part is more or less okay, but the decal is literally starting to come off. And I'm just washing it with warm water. So I'm just curious. Bump free zone. I agree, especially when it comes to the bumps on the streets. I want a clean shot, man, so I can buzz around in my Honda. Okay, so we'll go back to catch back up here. So I'm going to talk about Camo. Now, I am... unfortunately, because I'm using Mac OS 10.15, the Sequoia beta, I'm on beta 2. And of course, I'm running the beta of Ecamm. There's a little bit of a disconnect between Camo Studio, and I'm hoping to get some information from the folks at Reincubate about this, about how to get it to work, because they're referencing old information as far as how to enable certain security preferences so that you can have the Camo source show up inside of Ecamm as a camera. But I can at least demonstrate it for you so you can see how it works. And the reason why I like Camo is not so much because it uses, it makes my iPhone a viable camera source for Ecamm, but because it has a lot of the controls that are kind of built into the camera, but are hidden unless you're using the Blackmagic camera app, which doesn't show up as a camera source in Ecamm. So this is probably the best way to get your camera, the best effects from your camera, from your iPhone into Ecamm. So let me go into screen sharing here. You can take a look. Yes, continue to allow. Okay, so here we are. So here's my iPhone, and my iPhone is 2 steps over from my FX30. So I've got 3 cameras lined up here. So this is my iPhone, and here's Camo Studio. Now, Camo Studio has a bunch of controls around the preview window, and I'm not going to focus on every little detail here. But I do think that it's worth noting that there are some key features in here that allow you to fine-tune the image and get a better quality. And I also kept the picture up from my FX30 just so you can see the difference between the two. So you can see how the light responds, for instance. They're set to very similar settings. My FX30 is set to 100 ISO or ISO, and the white balance is identical. The setting is identical, let's put it that way. Of course, because it's a fixed aperture lens, you're not getting the blur in the background, but you can see the difference between the two, side by side. So this one over here and this one over here, right? Okay. I'm just kidding. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different versions of me on the screen right now. So bear with me if I point in the wrong direction. Okay, so let me go into Camo Studio here, and yes, you can connect multiple iPhones using Camo. Yes, you can. Now, will they show up as independent sources? That I don't No, I've never tried. Um, Perhaps I don't have another iPhone to test it on. Um, I've never done that before. That's a good question, George. So yeah, he's asking that, and it's something definitely I should look into because I don't know the answer to that one. The one thing I will tell you is do not use continuity camera, and the reason why I say that is because it's unreliable. Now they just enabled iPhone mirroring in macOS Sequoia, the latest beta, and I haven't tested it out yet because I literally installed it last night. So there is maybe some improvements to the way that I have no idea where to look right now. Over here, there's maybe some improvements to the way that it it connects with continuity camera, but I think if you look at the number of support questions that appear on the forums regarding continuity camera, it's a half-baked feature that certainly has a lot of potential, but unfortunately, we may never see it come to fruition. That's why I use camo, honestly. So even if I'm going with single source, it has far more control in it. So here, going back, you can choose your resolution right here. You can choose. Are you not seeing my pointer? There we go. You can see the resolution right here. So well, first of all, you can pick your lens, which is pretty cool. So if I wanted to go, get ready for a close up, like. Okay, I missed some spots this morning. Oh, my eyes were half open. But you've got your, ultra wide setting, and now you're seeing outside my cone of cleanliness, and then I'll go back to my wide setting. You can pick between the 3 different cameras on your iPhone, which is pretty killer. And then you can choose your resolution, and you can go up to 4K with this. So you can pull 4K. I'm not going to bother pulling 4K because I'm streaming at 1080, and this is a smaller window than even the full frame, so I'm not going to bother. But you can see that that is available, and you can choose your different frame rate too. If you want to pick up audio from your device, you can. I typically don't, because then you start getting audio mirroring, or you get echo, or what appears to be echo, and it's because you're picking up audio from your microphone and the camera's microphone at the same time. So it's just a video source for me. Then also, one of the things that Camo has that I like, I don't really use, but I like, is that they have these overlays that you can just pop in. Right, and these they'll make their way to the camera source inside of Ecamm. So you can, if there's some other ones in here like this, there we go, and you can edit these to be whatever you want. Go away. I know there's all kinds of warnings here, but you can edit these overlays. To me, honestly, because of the fact that Ecamm has all these overlays, it's really not a requirement. I think the only thing is that if you were in the process of demonstrating Camo Studio and you wanted people to quickly know the difference between what is camo, oops, let me go back here. What is camo and what is your regular camera from Ecamm? Dang it, Jeremy. Let me lock that screen share. There we go. And I'm trying to go here. There we go. So you could, like, this one has the logo on it, and then you can do other overlays like this. So, I mean, man, this thing is going to drive me bazonkers with these overlays. It's nice to have these. They're just PNGs that you can create in something like Photoshop and then pull in, and it's nice to have, but not a, absolutely not a requirement to use. So I just turn them off. In most cases, I turn them off. The framing is nice because, like I was doing before, right now, normally what I would do is I would use the camera effects window in Ecamm. If this was pulled in as a camera source, I would use the camera effects window to zoom in. But because that's not functioning at the moment, I'm using the zoom feature that's built into the Camo Studio app itself, and that's down here. And it looks a lot like the Ecamm settings here, right? So you can, after you zoom in, you can pan around, right? That's true. Yes. Camo can do the emojis. I have mixed feelings about emojis. I don't know. I just have mixed feelings. They're cute for certain broadcasts, but yeah, right. So you don't. Yeah, you've got the effects now that you can trigger from your Stream Deck inside of Ecamm. So I don't really, I just don't bother with that stuff. And if I really want special effects, it goes into post, and I do all my effects editing in post anyway. Let's see. Drag and pan. Okay. And then let's see the rotation. That's an obvious one. You can rotate the camera. Probably over on the other side is where I want to focus some of the attention, though. And that is, excuse me, your background here. So you can see this is just the default background. Now, if I click this, you can see that it has, it's blurred it a little bit. Now, this is their best attempt at that blurred background, but it's to me, it's a bit strong. It's a bit heavy-handed, but you can dial that in and just get a little bit more blur than you would get without it, right? And this is the thing that I do like this one. You can see my microphone's in focus, so like the thing I was complaining about before, but now back behind me, it's a little bit blurry. And if I go turn it off, you can see the difference. Back on. So this background setting I find to be a little bit more effective than like the defaults that are built into Zoom. Who knows? Maybe they'll get better. But for me, when I was doing my training series, I had this camera set up, or I had my iPhone set up, and I just blurred it slightly in the background, and it looked halfway decent in a pinch. It still doesn't make up for the fact that you really should have a decent background. So if you are on the road and you're at a hotel, talking about the lighting like we talked about yesterday in the last one, and talking about cameras now, really, there's got to be a good way to come up with some kind of background where you don't have to blur it completely, and then it just looks like a smudged background. So this actually does kind of work. I don't use Spotlight, but you can, if you turn on Spotlight, you see what it does. It kind of highlights me, but you see what happens there. This is the part. These computer generated effects drive me bazonkers. You see around like around my ear here, which is very easy to notice. But if I see that, yeah, I'm not a fan of that at all. So I don't use Spotlight. If you want to put some filters on there, you can, I don't know. If you wanted to, they have this film print, which, yeah, okay. If you've ever, I'm about to do a product review on a product called Dehancer for Final Cut that does film like completely over the top. So I'm not even going to demonstrate this, but I'm going to set that to none for now. I just leave that alone. If you want certain effects inside of Ecamm, just use the Ecamm camera effects window for that stuff. exposure setting. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm mimicking the exposure of the FX30 and the iPhone, but you can already see that there's a difference between the two. As a matter of fact, I've got my shutter speed identical between the two. Now, the camera is currently running at 30 frames per second, which means that you want your shutter speed at 60 frames per second. So that's what I've got it set to, 1/60th. And then my ISO rating is at 100, which is also what I have the camera set to on the FX30. And you can see the image difference between these two, right? Let's say we're going to go that way. Yeah. So that you can see the image difference. So here in and of itself, the sensor quality plays a big difference, or it plays a big role in the difference between the two. And then white balance. I set them to identical white balance so you can see the difference. Like here's my white balance set up. Wow, I'm getting some sun as I'm getting outside with the kids. So I've got my white balance dialed in my FX30 where I want it. And then you can see what it looks like inside of Camo Studio. So you can play around with this. Sometimes the white balance doesn't necessarily accurately reflect what you would see with a properly balanced camera because the sensors themselves are not that great. And there's no real auto white. I mean, there is an auto white balance inside of Camo Studio, where if you just turn off your white balance, your manual white balance setting right here, it'll put it into auto white balance mode. So one of the tricks you can do is you can get your gray card. If you've got one of those, you can get your gray card, you set it up. Matter of fact, let's do that. All right, here we go. So I got my gray card here, right? And I'm going to put this in front of my iPhone. And I'm going to turn on auto white balance. So this is what the white balance in Camo Studio is detecting right now. Okay, so, and then I toggled it on and off, and now it's set to 4600 instead of 4800. So is it a little bit better? Yeah, I guess so. I guess it is. Really what we're talking about here, the difference between the two is the exposure rate. So I could probably boost, I can't really take down, I could increase my frame rate to take down the, I could go like that, for instance, and that gets a little bit closer to what I'm seeing down below. So yeah, I mean, you can get it. It's not half bad. And the only reason for the tilt here, by the way, is because my camera is slightly tilted on the mount that it's sitting on right now. So that's not a Camo Studio thing. And then everything else you more or less just leave alone, like hue, saturation, vibrance. Again, those are all things you can set in Ecamm. So there's no real need to play around with these settings here. I don't think they're going to give you any different control versus using something inside of Ecamm. The only thing that I would play with would be white balance, because there's no white balance setting inside of Ecamm. White balance and even the exposure setting here, I think, is appropriate to use. So just to recap on Camo, I focus on my frame rate and my my output size from the camera. And then if I need to, I'll zoom in here a bit. But again, if this was working inside of Ecamm, I would probably just have it working in Ecamm with the zoom and pan settings. I wouldn't bother. I just leave this set to 100%. And don't do it twice. Don't zoom in Camo Studio and then zoom again in Ecamm. You're going to get a completely distorted, ugly image. Don't either pick one or the other, but not both of them. Spotlight I leave off. I'll sometimes play with that blurred background just to give me a slight bokeh effect. And then I'll play with exposure and white balance. That's what I use Camo Studio for. Now, there is Camo Studio on the iPad that allows you to take multiple sources in. And I have not played with that, George. If you're still on, I have not played with that one. I have to try it. The iPads that I run on here in the studio are all older iPads, so they're not capable of running Camo Studio that effectively. But I might be able to swipe my wife's iPad and play around with it because I would love to see how that all works. Of course, now Apple's getting into it with their camera windows for Final Cut, and Blackmagic's getting into it. So there are ways to pull in multiple sources. Now, how that gets piped into Ecamm, I have yet to really explore that, but I think it is an option. So, yeah, and so Camo Studio for the iPad's pretty cool, though. And let's see. Yeah, so yeah, the blur is really handy. It's not a requirement, but the blur is really handy. That all I was saying here. Yeah. So again, if I don't have my Pocket 3 with me, I'll use the phone, and I've got one of those magnetic mounts that sits on the lid or my laptop's lid when I'm on the road. The only problem or the only thing I don't like about those is that it's tied to your laptop lid, and you've got this heavy mount on top of a laptop lid with a heavy camera, and any movement in the lid of your laptop will shake the camera. And there is no real stabilization inside of the camera. And as a result, you'll get a lot of shaking movement. So I tend to stay away from that. And actually, now that I've kind of talked about the phone, let me pull it out here real quick. All right. So you can see, whoa, well, there it goes. Okay. That was a demo that went bad. I've got the Osmo, the Pocket 3 here. And I think, I see what happened. Turn off this, disconnect this power. All right. That was a demo gone wild. But you can see right there, I've got it on a tripod, which also doubles as a selfie stick. And I'm not sure why it's blurry. That's weird. Let me just turn off there we go. But you can see how that's working right there. So what I've got actually, I don't know if you can see it on the, well, here, you can see it here if I do this. I'm using this is the handheld Osmo stick that DJI sells, and this allows me to do my stabilized gimbal movements. And this is what I take with me when I'm on the road. And this allows me to do both portrait, and if I want to, I can snap over into portrait and landscape mode. So that's kind of neat. This is the Osmo, I don't know, 3, 6, I forget at this point, but that's the kit, and this works out really well for taking people around. Like if I wanted to do this with my studio, I can do this. All right, it all works. Works a lot like the Pocket Osmo Pocket. There we go. So I use this this particular device instead of the camera mounted to my my laptop monitor, and this keeps it nice and stable. Even if it's sitting, like if my laptop monitor was right here, this thing has an extension on it that allows me to pop it up above the monitor, and then with the tripod here on the base, which doubles as a handle when you close it, this allows me to basically put this anywhere. So okay, so yeah, that is you're really the three options that I roll with when I'm doing my my camera settings. I do plan to add an additional either a ZVE10, or if somehow I manage to get a budget for another FX30, I will. And those are great for interview modes. Like behind me, I've got the two chairs. I got one here and one here, and there's a table behind me, and I eventually want to set up cameras. But really, to do a good interview setup that I can stream in Ecamm, I need 3 cameras. I need a center camera that's got a wide shot, and then one on each person. And that's a hefty investment. So whether or not I do that remains to be seen. But hopefully this was some good info for you guys. Everybody has their own thing. Oh, also, I brought this out, so I might as well talk about it. This little guy, the Camlink 4K. This is the bane of many people's existence when it comes to capturing video. So, for instance, right now, the FX30 that I've got hooked in and that I'm talking to you on right now has its own Camlink 4K that is connected directly to the back of the Mac Mini that I'm running this on. And it works, I would say, 98% of the time. I mean, honestly, I don't really have any issues with this Camlink. And if I hook in the other Camlink that I have to the other USB-A port on the back of the computer, it also will work fine. And I can have both going at the same time. So for me, yes. And the HD60 is, they have a new one too. It's like the HD, I think it's the X, something like that. Oh, but it didn't work for the Switch. Okay. So there you go. But yeah, my biggest problem with all of the Elgato other capture stuff is that they have pass through, but they still all only capture as it would be for anything else. They only capture on the Mac. On the Mac, got to be specific about this because on Windows for some reason it's different, but on the Macintosh, the other capture boards that they have are just like the 4K. So it doesn't make any sense to get anything other than the Camlink 4K if you're capturing, because they all do up to 1080. I'm sorry, 4K 60. And beyond that, it doesn't work. Even if the board itself is capturing at that higher frame rate. I've returned several of the Elgato capture boards because they have not worked. And they're like, oh, well, it does work on Windows. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not, I'm not the kind of guy that is going to run Windows, right? So why would I bother? It's like, why don't you just say it on your support page that these resolutions are supported? And they never do. Roy, you're in town. Look at you. Yes. And so I'm looking at that Rode Streamer X as something that I could take on the road with me. No pun intended. Because I think that it would be great for that particular application. And I could totally see like the Cam Links come with this little USB-A to USB-A extension, right? So you can buy a USB-A to USB-C conversion, but you have to be careful with these cables. And I know this is something that the Ecamm folks have been harping on a lot lately, is having solid cables in your arsenal and tossing the ones that come with a lot of the equipment because they're junk. And I do not dare use anything other than what Elgato supplied, but I bet that there is a USB-A female to USB-C male equivalent that works just fine in all settings. Because I have the CalDigit Element hubs. I've got 3 of them running into the Mac right now, and at some point it would be great to be able to pop in those. At some point, I'm probably going to get the TS4 dock that they've got too, and really expand things out. But then, I add all that up, and I've basically bought a Mac Studio. So I don't know. I don't know what the right solution is there, but at least from a port configuration, you have way more options if you're running it through a Thunderbolt hub or a Thunderbolt hub. Let's see. Would you know if we can use PlayStation 5? My guess is that, let's see, Roy, did you say anything? No. Okay, so my guess with the PlayStation 5 is that there is probably some HDMI copy protection going on that is preventing the signal from getting captured by the capture board, by the Elgato capture board. I can't be 100% certain about that, but I know that when the HDMI spec came out, that was one of the things that manufacturers or content creators absolutely wanted, was a way to have a digital signal, but not make it easy for people to copy the content in a digital format. So if it has embedded copy protection in the HDMI out of the PS5, there may be a way to strip that out through some kind of converter that, essentially just pulls out the digital signal and leaves behind. It doesn't even recognize the copy protection. I don't know, but that would be my first guess. So if any of you guys that are watching have any comments on that, but yeah, it's off topic, but it's okay. There's only 4 of you online right now, so I'll talk about anything. Yeah, I don't game much anymore either. Yeah, the CalDigit Element is great. And so, okay, the US, okay, so you're using the Anchor products are really good. I've got a few of them, and there's a lot of course, Anchor was kind of an off brand when it first came out, and now they're the shizzles in the power space, right? With all the little battery packs and everything. And now everybody's trying to copy them, whether it be the little AC adapters that plug into the wall and spread it out into 2 USB-Cs and a USB-A or whatever. There's copycats all over the place. And one of the things that I'm struggling with personally is that, like, for instance, all these lights that are back here, they're all running off a USB. And so you have to have you can't have, I've got a couple of power, I forget what you call them, but the basically an outlet breakout box that attaches to the wall where the outlet is. And then it creates 8 outlets instead of 2. And then it also has built-in USB power. Those suck. They will not produce enough power for, if you plug in 2 high draw USB devices, they will not, they won't work. And I have, don't razz me for this, but I've got one of these, the Blue Yeti that I've custom colorized with my Saints colors. And that one gets powered through USB, and I had it plugged into one of those devices, and the noise, just the audible power noise that those things generate, I can't imagine why it's useful at all. So definitely get yourself an appropriate sized USB converter, charger, whatever it is. But as far as the cabling goes, yes, Anchor makes some great cables. Also, there's another one, JSOX, JSASEAUX, I think. I've seen them on Amazon. Yeah, the CalDigit, yeah, absolutely wonderful. Streamer X does work with the PS5 and Xbox. Okay, well, there you go. So the Streamer X just says, copy protection, schmoppy protection. I don't care. Who knows? I mean, that's if that works, then great. Then you can stream that stuff. I'm guessing the Switch was probably a little bit more compatible. Um, I don't know. I take my wife to Nintendo every day for work, and I have no idea. I have no idea what they're working on, and I have even less of an idea what they're doing in terms of this copy protection. Um, whoa, okay. Well, let's see. I could go on for cameras about ever. So I think I will wrap it though, because I gotta go teach some brats. No, they're not brats. I gotta teach some kids how to make movies. So I'm gonna head on out. But thanks for joining in, everybody. I always love having these interactions, and the small groups are awesome because I can respond to way more than I could if there was a bunch of people on the line. I've seen some of these live streams, like the guy I've as a pilot, I'll watch the live streams of like the airport. People will set up outside of LAX, for instance, and they've got these spiffy cameras. And by the way, most of them are using Ecamm, and they'll be, filming the planes taking on and off, and the comments are just going blah, and there's just no way to respond to everybody. It's just it's a free for all on the comment section. So. Thanks a lot, George. Appreciate it. And thank you all for joining in. And I will see you tomorrow. We got 2 days left. And again, I'm going to bring in Andy on Friday, and we'll talk about his Summer of Live stuff that he's doing so that you guys can keep your fix going. So, all right. Everybody take care. Have a great day or evening. And I will see you on the next one.